I note that today's subject is about Himalayan Yogis and Yogananda and Yukteswarji. The tradition in India was for thousands of years that people would, if they felt a deep calling to know the Lord, very often, if their call was intense, they would give up society and go live in the Himalayas. The Himalayas just beckoned to so many because mountains tend to have very pure and powerful vibrations. Mountains tend to enable one to feel much more in tune with one's own nature, with various powerful currents that help lift the mind. The air is generally better there. If you've been to India, you know what can be done to the air. You can understand a bit more about the reason people left society if you just go and be in India a while. Because it's just so busy and so active and so bustling all the time that you feel kind of a push. You see, you begin to feel, wow, you kind of got more of a demarcation. It's either got to be householder or get out of there. You get that feeling now and then. That's part of this whole tradition. And this is what the writings of the Himalayan Yogis tend to indicate. But what happened in the Himalayas is there became, over the centuries, some magnificent realized saints, some people who would regularly manifest the divine light and the divine love and the divine power. Very often they would come down and mingle with society at Kumbh Melas. They'd come down every few years or every 12 years and shed their light. But the main thing about the Himalayan Yogis was that from about 4 to 6 a.m. every day, for most of their lives, these Himalayan Yogis, especially the ones who had high realization, would sit there from their mountain caves or wherever and meditate for the benefit of humanity. They would feel they were very privileged to be in that lofty and special place, and that as part of that privilege they owed to their human brothers and sisters the courtesy and also the debt of sharing their very best. And very often, if you'll meditate between 4 and 6 a.m., you'll be able to be much more in tune with the Himalayan Yogis, who are extremely great saints, a number of them, most of them unknown. And they are sending out their love and light to humanity every morning. And it tends to be that if you want to tune in at your time zone between 4 and 6 a.m., you'll most easily be able to sense them. Somehow there seems to be no time zone in the earthly sense. It seems to be that with the dawn, this consciousness just rolls around the world. I really enjoyed a lot of the meditations I did at that time. This kind of Himalayan. You'll very often in your meditation, if you think of the Himalayan masters, begin to see in your quiet meditation pairs of eyes. Serene, deep, conscious, loving eyes, kind of watching you, and you wonder, what on earth are those eyes? And in a way, as you get deep in meditation, you'll realize this is the brotherhood of saints, wishing you the very best. The tradition of the Himalayan Yogis is that from time to time they incarnate and go out and serve humanity, and then they end up where they want to be, back in the Himalayas very often. They go back to the Himalayas, get charged up, and come back out again. I know of some masters who have come down from the Himalayas, immediately gotten very sick. They just didn't know how bad it was, the vibrations, the consciousness, the disease, and they get very sick, like the Master Kutumi came down to share with humanity. He was a very great yogi, came down to share, got so sick he had to go back home. And he consolidated his strength, and he just developed a very thick energy rind. Just got really, really strong. Then he came back. He just had no idea how hard it was on people to live in the world. Because these masters, they only have to deal with snakes, poisonous snakes, and horrible cold winds. With not too much clothing and hard to get food. Those are their only problems. And they find, coming down here, that it's much harder. It's much harder. Why? Because delusion is much worse than the wind and the snake. Delusion, that which steals your very soul and your lifeblood from you. To be encountering that on a daily basis, there's where the rough life is. And so they very often, out of compassion, want to come down and share, and they incarnate for that purpose and do things of that sort. Master Yogananda was one of these. He had lived in the Himalayas in a previous existence, many previous existences, and he got born in Bengal, I believe. He lived most of his early life in Bengal. I don't know exactly where he was born, but he yearned from a very young age. He kept seeing in his mind all these great Himalayan yogis just sitting around in these meditations, just looking at him, and just yearned and yearned to be with them. And when you begin to see them, you'll yearn to be with them. You'll think a very romantic, idyllic life is to be had for you in the Himalayas. I don't know of any yogi who has avoided or evaded that dream. When I was a child, I was always wanting to go to Tibet, and I didn't know where it was. Just when I heard about Tibet, that's where I wanted to be, Tibet. That was it. And that's the way it goes. If you want to tune in with the Himalayan Yogis, meditate between 4 and 6 a.m. Sense the brotherhood of those who go into samadhi on a regular basis, those who can do quite a number of wonders, and dedicating their meditations to humanity. I'm very pleased to know that this great yogi, Yogeshwara Anandaji Saraswati, came here a few years ago. 96 years of age at that time. He looked like he was under 60. It was beautiful. He told me that there are some marvelous, marvelous experiences to be had in the Himalayas. You can go up one of the Himalayas, one of the mountains there, and there's a crystal clear, gorgeous lake at 18,000 feet. And he said a lot of yogis like to hover around that place. But he said that these yogis had learned so many secrets of life that he said, and I'm not saying whether I agree or not, he just said that there are many yogis, 300, 400 years old, who had just discovered how to look after their body and live well and just prevent all the decay, and that they were centuries old, these yogis. But he said a horrible thing was happening. When the Chinese came and kicked the Tibetans out of Tibet, they did a program of looking for these yogis whom they didn't respect or agree with and killing them. They just shot and killed as many of these yogis as they could find, just trying to get rid of them and get them out of people's consciousness. It's a sad, sad thing. And he said that a number of these great yoga masters had been shot dead by the Chinese. There's another aspect, before I get into some talk about each of these great ones. Vishnudevananda was a yogi in the Himalayas, at Rishikesh and other places, and he advised young Americans not to go there. He said, you'll make more progress in California than you ever would. And he says, most of the Himalayan yogis that he knows of go there to find God, and they find they're not able. They're not dedicated and devoted enough. And he said, they go there, they start out meditating 16 hours a day, and it doesn't work very well. Then they meditate 12 and just kind of socialize and laze around. And then they meditate 8. And within about half a year or a year, they're meditating about 4 hours a day only. And he said they spend the rest of the time, he says so they want to be in society with one another, so they just spend their time gossiping. He says all kinds of people who go there to meditate and find God end up just minimal sadhana, minimal spiritual practice, and just kind of gathering around. But they are also afraid of people from society in general, so if you know where to go, you'll just scare them all away. They'll just run from you. So he was saying that the Himalayan tradition is great, but in fact, at this time in society that mostly it's tamasic. Mostly it's tamasic. And that one had a much better chance being in a rajasic place like California than in a tamasic place like the present Himalayas. Now, that was his advice given at one of his classes up in Los Angeles. Very interesting. Anyway, so we've got to put that perspective into this too. Well, Paramahansa Yogananda was one of the fine yogis of this century and perhaps several centuries. He began early to yearn to be with his family, his spiritual family in the Himalayas. And he met his guru by a marvelous kind of magnetism. He'd been looking for a guru for some time, couldn't find one. He saw his guru standing in a lane, and he went past his guru. He didn't know that the guy was his guru, and his feet just kind of stopped, and he felt stuck there. And he tried to go in other directions, but he found he couldn't go in other directions. Magnetically, because he was quite a developed soul, magnetically he couldn't proceed, so he turned and he found the only direction he could go was to the feet of this beautiful holy man, Sri Yukteswar. Well, that's how he met Sri Yukteswar. Now, Yukteswar didn't pass muster with Yogananda. I mean, imagine that, being magnetically attracted to him and everything, but Yogananda was impatient to get on with it, and Yukteswar didn't match up. And so Yogananda began to think, yeah, I'd be better off in the Himalayas. So even having ashram duties and various things that he should do, he sneaked away to go find his home and spiritual enlightenment. Just sneaked away. And as a result of sneaking away, he got various problems that happened. He got misdirected. And he got kind of ticked off. And he got snobbish when he was in the Shiva temple. Didn't treat it with respect. And then he met up with, because he had this extremely good karma, Ram Gopal, the sleepless saint. Ram Gopal was an absolutely amazing enlightened being. He hardly needed any sleep at all. He was able, through his meditations, to do the very process that sleep would do, only he did it consciously. And he spent generally about 20 hours a day immersed in various kinds of samadhi. I think he's really a great yogi, this Ram Gopal. But reading about him made me think that all yogis worth their salt are sleepless, you know, when I was romantically involved in yoga. And so I thought, well, I got to stay up all the time because I really don't like to sleep. I think it's a waste of time. I mean, all the things you could be doing. And so I've had many wrestling matches with sleep in my life. I've never really wanted to sleep. I like it, it's okay in its own way, but I mean, wouldn't you rather be in samadhi all the time, you know, and in some kind of samadhi instead of unconscious? So, studying about him and thinking about him a lot when I was in solitude one summer, tried to tune in with him and become sleepless. Anyway, Yogananda gets instructed, it's a Himalayan yogi you're with. I mean, that's what you seek, not being in a rock pile, a colossal rock pile. You want to be with a Himalayan yogi, one who has a Himalayan realization. Sends him back to Sri Yukteswar, who was hard to take. He was hard to take. Yogananda once said that Yukteswar ran everybody off except himself and two others who were just kind of like too dumb to run, you know, that kind of thing. But it's partly because Yogananda didn't know that secretly Yukteswar had other devotees that he was initiating as well that were just not part of that public life at the ashram. For example, Chandishwar, Giri, people like that. Some pretty great yogis he initiated. But the reason that Yukteswar was a real stickler, an incredible stickler, he'd never make it in the West, but He was sick and tired of the world. I mean, as a yogi, one realizes this is God's creation, but he thought, yeah, there are much better creations, much better aspects elsewhere. And he was just sick and tired of the slowness and the thickness, the thick-headedness of people of this planet, found so few candidates that he said to the Lord, and the Lord agreed. He had done his time. He was going to go to a place where people more suitable candidates. So he was to accept no chelas who would not succeed in becoming enlightened in this life. So his process was to really give them a rough time, to determine if they were interested in succeeding in attaining liberation in this life. Because if any one of them didn't attain liberation in this life, he'd have to come back. And he wanted to go a more suitable place, so he did. I'm already committed, by the way. I'll be back. I see it differently, though. I see it differently. But Yogananda said, you have no idea what it takes to come to this earth. If you attain the Himalayan state, a state of awareness like these Himalayan Yogis. He said, taking on a body and walking among people is like putting on a fur coat, a heavy fur coat, on a hot day in July. And he says that's what it feels like to walk the earth, compared to the state of freedom that these guys feel. However, I disagree with that too, in the sense that Sri Ramakrishna just made a whole new dimension out of this, a whole new dimension. But we're not talking about him today so much. But there are other ways of looking at it, folks. Anyway, he comes back to Sri Yukteswarji, and Yukteswar sitting there, and Yogananda said, "Sir, I must have made you very angry." And Yukteswar, who is aiming for another planet, says, if you were to make me angry, it would be that you're acting contrary to my expectations. But I really have no expectations regarding you. And so, since I don't have expectations, I'm not angry. Let's go have a bite. And Yogananda was forever abiding in the memory of that. An early relationship between the two of them was, Yukteswar said, one day all this will be yours. You know, he said all these properties will be yours. Yukteswar had to fight like crazy to maintain a small estate so he could be independent. He had to go to court and defend himself in court and be very eloquent in order to defend his rights, but that enabled him to be really independent. And he said, all this will be yours one day to Yogananda. And he said at another time, I give you my love. Do you give me your love? And Yogananda said, if your love is as great as Christ's, if you will help me realize the Christ consciousness, something like that. And Yukteswar said, your love stinks. And that's the way people usually approach the Guru. What happened was when Kriyananda met Yogananda, the same story. And Kriyananda blundered along in the same way, and he ended up being told his love stinked. I guess selfish love stinks. But one day, finally, Kriyananda said to him, Master, I want to love the way you love. And Yogananda said, you have no idea what you're asking. We're talking about people who are just beyond our ability to conceive. Incredible. Well, he came back to Sri Yukteswar, had a bite, and he sat down to meditate and try to put up with not being in the Himalayas, not being where he felt at home, although he'd really never been there much. So while he was sitting there one day, he said that his thoughts just were like birds that were just running from the noisy hunter as he came along. And so Yukteswar noticed, and he noticed the guy was ready. Of course, if you've got a guy who's done yoga for many lifetimes, they don't take quite that long to get ready, but he was ready. And so Sri Yukteswar came up to him. And it's just beautiful. Poor boy, he said. By the way, I probably, I don't know every line of this. I don't know, maybe not. But I have loved this book, The Autobiography of Yogi, for so many years. I've read it. I have just digested it, savored it. I mean, great book. I recommend it. Autobiography of a Yogi. Anyway, it says, poor boy, mountains cannot give you what you want. Master spoke caressingly, comfortingly. His calm gaze was unfathomable. Your heart's desire shall be fulfilled, he said. He gently struck my chest above the heart. An oceanic joy broke upon calm, endless shores of my soul. The Spirit of God, I realized, is exhaustless bliss. His body is countless tissues of light. I cognized the center of the Empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my heart. Irradiating splendor issued from my nucleus to every part of the universal structure. Blissful Amrita. You must not get overdrunk with ecstasy, he goes on to say. Much work yet remains for you in the world. Come, let us sweep the balcony floor, then we shall walk by the Ganges. I fetched a broom. Master, I knew, was teaching me the secret of balanced living. The soul must stretch over the cosmogonic abysses while the body performs its daily duties. It is the Spirit of God that actively sustains every form and force in the universe. Yet he is transcendental and aloof. The cosmic vision left many permanent lessons. By daily stilling my thoughts, I could win release from the delusive conviction that my body was a mass of flesh and bones, traversing the hard soil of matter. Oh, I tell you, this guy knows how to write, or rewrite, or he's got a good pen pal, I'll tell you. I understand a lot of people worked on this book, but I don't know. I could win release from the delusive conviction that my body was a mass of flesh and bones, traversing the hard soil of matter. The breath and the restless mind I saw are like storms. The breath, here's a lot of where he comes from. The breath and the restless mind I saw are like storms that lash the ocean of light into waves of material forms. I'd really work with that chapter, if you want to know. It's about, it's called The Experience in Cosmic Consciousness. A really fine chapter. I saw the breath and the restless mind I saw are like storms that lash the ocean of light into waves of material forms. Earth, sky, human beings, animals, birds, trees. This is very similar to what Sri Ramakrishna talked about at times. No perception of the infinite as one light can be had except by calming these storms. Breath and the restless mind. You must calm these storms if you want to see something absolutely beautiful. As often as I quieted the two natural tumults, I beheld the multitudinous waves of creation melt into one lucent sea. Even as the waves of the ocean, when a tempest subsides, serenely dissolve into unity. Think about that. Think about the storm of the breath and the storm of the mind, and see if you can feel it calming down. Think of them as the storms that are keeping you from awareness, and calm down the storm. You're still striving to calm those storms. If you haven't, had lots of really high experience, you just haven't calmed the storms. That's one way of looking at it. You got to calm the storms, the breath and the mind. Those are storms, ego storms, fear storms, anxiety storms, chaos storms. Just get storm free. It's a beautiful way of looking at it. That's the whole principle of Kriya Yoga, calming the storm. When you calm your storm, then you can experience things like this. In his poem, it's a beautiful poem called Samadhi. Vanished the veils of light and shade, lifted every vapor of sorrow, sailed away all dawns of fleeting joy, gone the dim sensory mirage, love, hate, health, disease, life, death, perished these false shadows on the screen of duality. The storm of Maya stilled by magic wand of intuition deep. I memorized this one. Present, past, future, no more for me, but ever-present, all-flowing I everywhere. Now, a bhakta perhaps wouldn't experience the I everywhere. It'd be the you everywhere. Planets, stars, stardust, earth, volcanic bursts of doomsday, cataclysms, creation's molding furnace, glaciers of silent X-rays, burning electron floods, thoughts of all men, past, present, to come, every blade of grass, myself, mankind, every particle of universal dust, anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lust, I swallowed, transmuted all into a vast ocean of blood of my own one being. Smoldering joy, oft-puffed by meditation, blinding my tearful eyes, burst into immortal flames of bliss, consumed my tears, my frame, my all. Thou art I, and I am thou. Knowing, knower, known as one, tranquil, unbroken thrill, eternally living, ever-new peace, enjoyable beyond imagination of expectancy, samadhi, bliss. Not an unconscious state or mental chloroform without willful return. Samadhi but extends my conscious realm beyond limits of the mortal frame, to farthest boundary of eternity, where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. Mobile murmurs of atoms are heard, the dark earth, mountains, vales, low, molten liquid. Flowing seas change into vapors of nebulae. Aum blows upon vapors, opening wondrously their veils. Oceans stand revealed, shining electrons, till at the last sound of the cosmic drum vanish the grosser lights into eternal rays of all-pervading bliss. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt. Ocean of mind, I drink all creation's waves. Four veils of solid, liquid, vapor, light, lift aright. I in everything enter the great myself. Gone forever fitful flickering shadows of mortal memory. Spotless is my mental sky, below ahead and high above. Eternity and I, one united ray. A tiny bubble of laughter, I am become the sea of mirth itself. Sri Yukteswar taught me how to summon the blessed experience at will, and also how to transmit it to others when their intuitive channels are developed. For months after the first time I entered the state of ecstasy, ecstatic union, comprehending daily why the Upanishads say God is rasa, the most relishable. One morning, however, I took a problem to master. I want to know, sir, when shall I find God? You have found him. Oh, no, sir, I don't think so. My guru was smiling. I'm sure you aren't expecting a venerable personage adorning a throne in some antiseptic corner of the cosmos. It goes on, and it's all great. Yeah, I have to read that. I mean, it gets very good. It's incredible. Well, now about Sri Yukteswar. Sri Yukteswar was chosen by the great yogi Babaji Maharaj, the Himalayan yogi who is said to be centuries old, because of his great mind. Sri Yukteswar was a brilliant man. He was chosen to show the harmony of the world's religions. And so his contribution to humanity was great spiritually and great verbally also, but this is about it. This is his main contribution. The holy science. I recommend wrestling with it and struggling with it. It's a beautiful book. I'd like to just read from his work, which doesn't have that dramatic flair, but it's sublime. The purpose of this book, he says, is to show as clearly as possible that there is an essential unity in all religions, that there is no difference in the truths inculcated by the various faiths, that there is but one method by which the world, yes, that's what he's saying, there is one method. Now, I'm not saying I agree with this. Please, if I'm quoting somebody, I'm not saying I agree. I think it's really, if somebody significant says something, you should listen, and consider it in the light of your path. There is but one method by which the world, both external and internal, has evolved, and that there is but one goal admitted by the Scriptures, by all Scriptures. But this basic truth is one not easily comprehended. The discord existing between the different religions and the ignorance of men make it almost impossible to lift the veil and have a look at this grand verity. The creeds foster a spirit of hostility and dissension. And isn't that true? The creeds foster a spirit of hostility and dissension. Ignorance widens the gulf that separates one creed from another. Only a few specially gifted persons can rise superior to the influence of their professed creeds and find absolute unanimity in the truths propagated by all great faiths. The object of this book is to point out the harmony underlying the various religions and to help in binding them together. This task is indeed a Herculean one, but at Allahabad I was entrusted with the mission by a holy command. Allahabad, the sacred Prayaga Tirtha, the place of confluence of the Ganges, the Jamuna, and the Saraswati rivers, is a site for the congregation of worldly men and of spiritual devotees at the time of the Kumbh Mela. That's this great gathering. Worldly men cannot transcend the mundane limits in which they have confined themselves, nor can spiritual devotees, having once renounced the world, deign to come down and mix themselves in its turmoil. Yet men who are wholly engrossed in earthly concerns stand in definite need of help and guidance from those holy beings who bring light to the race. So a place there must be where union between the two sets is possible. Tirtha affords such a meeting place. Situated as it is on the beach of the world, storms and buffets touch it not. The sadhus, the ascetics, with a message for the benefit of humanity, find the Kumbh Mela to be an ideal place to impart instruction to those who can heed it. A message of such a nature, was I chosen to propagate when I paid a visit to Kumbh Mela in 1894. As I was walking along the bank of the Ganges, I was summoned by a man and was afterwards honored by an interview with a great holy person, Babaji, the Guru Deva of my own Guru, Lahiri Mahashai of Banaras. This holy personage at the Kumbh Mela was thus my own Param Guruji Maharaj, though this was our first meeting. During my conversation with Babaji, we spoke of the particular class of men who now frequent these places of pilgrimage. I humbly suggested that there were men greater by far in intelligence than most of those then present, men living in distant parts of the world, Europe and America, professing different creeds and ignorant of the real significance of the Kumbh Mela. They were men fit to hold communion with spiritual devotees. He's just deploring what he's seeing there at the Kumbh Mela, and he's saying people in America and Europe with good minds are much more suitable to being gathered at a place like this and what's happening, he's saying. They were men fit to hold communion with the spiritual devotees, so far as his intelligence is concerned. Yet such intellectual men in foreign lands were, alas, wedded in many cases to rank materialism. Some of them, though famous for their investigations in realms of science and philosophy, do not recognize the essential unity in religion. The professed creeds serve as nearly insurmountable barriers that threaten to separate mankind forever. My Param Guruji Maharaj, Babaji, smiled, and honoring me with the title of Swami, imposed on me the task of this book. I was chosen, I do not know the reason why, to remove the barriers and help in establishing the basic truth in all religions. Worth its weight in gold. When I tried, this was out of print a long time, and I finally found one in the back of a big bookstore. And I said, I want this book. And the guy says, well, it's out of print. I said, I know, but it's on your shelf. How much? And he says, well, it's out of print. It's my only copy. If you buy a lot of books, I'll let you buy this one too. It cost me $80. This book. And I thought it was worth it. I enjoyed it in good health, but I didn't understand it. You get past the first 3 pages. If you understand it, then you're probably not understanding it. He's explaining how God created. You understand that? Good. Well, let's skip ahead to the main way that they realized the Lord was through practice of Kriya Yoga, which I particularly like. I've already talked about Kriya Yoga. I'm a guru of Kriya Yoga, so I have a certain bias. But my bias, by the way, is not Kriya. It's I basically find that there are... Oh, well, why don't I explain that? You see, their viewpoint was that this devotional fervor you need to know and love God is very rare, and it's better to do Kriya. They found that people were lacking in constant devotion, and so they were thinking Kriya was best. And their basic thrust was America like in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. Here it says, the universal appeal of yoga is thus its approach to God through a daily, usable, scientific method, rather than through a devotional fervor that for the average man is beyond his emotional scope. So that's the viewpoint of Kriya. And why Kriya instead of Bhakti Yoga? I could talk about that too. I mean, there's something to this. Because if people are just going to let their emotions run wild and call that fervor, or then say, but I'm a Bhakta, they're dead wrong. Various great teachers of India have been called Tirthakaras, ford makers. You know what a ford is? You cross a river. Because they reveal the passage by which bewildered humanity may cross over and beyond the stormy seas of delusion, the karmic wheel, the recurrence of lives and deaths. I'm going to paraphrase, so I recommend you read his the years 1940 to 1951. That's where I'm reading this from. Samsara, literally a flowing with the phenomenal flux, induces man to take the line of least resistance, and oh, do we pay. Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. You know, these guys are pretty strong. I mean, they've got the Himalayan renunciant view. See, Ramakrishna came along and showed this. Yeah, he said, you can play that way, but the world is a spiritual world, and you're a spiritual being. That's a new ball game. But you want to play old ball game. Whosoever, therefore, will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. To become a friend of God, man must overcome the devils or evils of his own karma, or actions that ever urge him to spineless acquiescence in the Mayic delusions of the world. Spineless agreement. And that's our devils and our evils. A knowledge of the iron law of karma. Iron law of karma. Encourages the earnest seeker to find the way of final escape from its bonds. Because the karmic slavery of human beings is rooted in the desires of Maya, darkened minds, delusion darkened minds. It is with mind control that the yogi concerns himself. The various cloaks of karmic ignorance are laid away, and man views himself in his native essence. That gets to the same place. The mystery of life and death, whose solution is the only purpose of man's sojourn on earth, the mystery of life and death, is intimately interwoven with the breath. Breathlessness is deathlessness. Realizing this truth, the ancient rishis of India seized on the sole clue of the breath and developed a precise and rational science of breathlessness. Had India no other gift for the world, Kriya Yoga alone would suffice as a kingly offering. Well, you got to read the rest. It's about how the human body is formed of the dust of the earth, and that we're actually not the dust of the earth. We are the breath that makes all this dust work. And so you get through breath to know the consciousness that enables the dust and them bones to walk around. And Kriya, for example, is the right of realizing your true life and your distinction from the dust. Why don't you ponder, if you would, think of your breath, and then think of the consciousness, the spirit that enables your breath to move, and try to make a distinction, if you can, between the dust of the earth and the breath of life, which actually is spirit or God.